At the early stages of NeuroCloud, you'll be presented with the opportunity to select which 3-star Sea Doll you want to receive. And I want to talk to you about which will be available and which you should choose based on how you want to start off the game. As always, don't forget to like and comment, as well as subscribe to support the channel and more content like this. Let's get it poppin'. Right off the bat, there are 8 Sea Dolls that will be available to you upon the launch of the game for you to select which will become your first 3-star Sea Doll. This will require 980 quartz sand to obtain, which I believe will be provided to you. But if I'm wrong, you'll be able to obtain this very easily through completing daily, main story, and achievement missions. The 8 Sea Dolls you'll be able to choose from are Florence, Evelyn, Banxsy, Jin, V, Chanzhi, Nanaka, and Centaureissi. If you're a casual player who doesn't care about in-game and all that extra stuff, just choose who you like the most. But if you plan on playing this game a bit more than the average person, or you simply want to select a better Sea Doll, choose more carefully. But keep in mind that these are not limited banner characters. You'll eventually obtain all of them by simply pulling for characters on the advanced or limited character banners. Since Florence is first on this list, let's start with her. Now, the reason that you may choose Florence is because she is a fantastic unit to choose for the early game, as she provides a massive damage reduction buff to help heal the target and doesn't need to have her rarity raised in order to be a useful Sea Doll. Her passive charm is a hit or miss. However, she does contain a very strong DPS oriented ultimate. At the end game, you'll find that the damage reduction is very useful for the harder content within the game, and her ult is very good with buff stacking. Now, since we started with medics, I'll go ahead and talk about Nanaka next, who's another great choice for the early game, but in most cases, she's not as good as Florence. Nanaka is an excellent AoE healer that can only be surpassed by Jean in that regard. Function cards proc very often in combat, and her ultimate is very strong as it allows you to select the location that generates an AoE that doesn't allow allied units to die for 5 seconds, while also healing all ally units in the area for 400% of Nanaka's hash rate. The end game is where she becomes more useful, as the ultimate that she possesses will prevent your units from being one-shot. When you use her with another medic, you'll lose less DPS coming from Nanaka. She also has excellent scaling through all the upcoming event content. The final medic on this list is Jean, who honestly isn't the best compared to the other two. However, he contains the highest HP of all medics in the game and procs function cards very often. He has an okay healing ultimate, but I wouldn't choose Jean over Nanaka for either the end game or the early game. Next, let's talk about Evelyn, who's a guard unit. For early game, she contains excellent damage reduction, and her ult allows you to reposition your allies, including herself, into another location on the map, while also providing a 60% damage reduction buff over the next 5 seconds. Now, if you build her correctly with the algorithm system, she scales very well and provides more crowd control against melee enemies. For the end game, her damage reduction will become a bit more handy when enemies become more tanky and more of an issue. Next is Banxsy. She's a specialist that contains a unique skill set that has the potential to negate enemy accuracy and evasion techniques. Her damage scales very well and is able to proc debuff functions. Now, the issue with Banxsy is that she kinda thinks on her own and repositions herself randomly, so much so that she may skate right into death. However, during the late game, if you become very familiar with her, she can work very well around physical damage Sea Dolls. If you build her well enough, she can melt her targets, but this unit requires a lot more careful use. Next up is my favorite Sea Doll so far. V is an attacker unit that I highly recommend, as she's the only ranged fighter in the game. I also recommend replacing Sol with her if chosen, as Sol becomes very useless closer to endgame. V has the ability to ignore enemy evasion, and her ultimate creates what is called a mask domain, which lasts for 5 seconds in a selected location. Enemies within this mask domain will take in a lot of damage equal to 300% hash rate. After the effect has ended, she will deal additional operated damage equal to 10% HP dealt per second at up to 150 of V's hash rate. Another very important detail is that V normally cannot crit, but her ultimate does have the ability to deal crit damage. Once you reach the end game, she doesn't really scale well due to not being pure attack, but if set up properly by utilizing the algorithm system and selecting proper function sets, her DPS output can be nasty. Next up is Centaureissi, who's another fighter unit, but I can't really recommend her as her ultimate can be blocked and I simply couldn't find a proper place for her in my party. The other fighters, with the exception of Soul, just are better options. She does have a cool knockback ability though. Maybe one of you guys watching can find a better use for her than I did, but once again, I cannot recommend her as your first 3-star choice. And last but not least, Chanzhi, which is a sniper that has been a blast to use and is highly recommended because of her ult, which fires needles in the selected direction, which deals physical damage equal to 500% attack in total to all enemies within her range, and her attack's range is massive. She is capable of dealing the highest AoE damage in the game, but her single target damage isn't that great for bosses, which makes her a bit difficult to use in specific situations, especially in the early game. Now, for the end game on the other hand, she could be a force to be reckoned with, especially if you pair her with units like Lam, who is a fantastic 1-star sniper unit that is great at the end game once built correctly. Now, a lot of this information was not collected by me, as I didn't use all of the units in the selector, but I provided a link in the description which will guide you to a tier list created by fantastic people in the NeuroCloud Discord. Let me know in the comment section who you'll be choosing and why. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well so that you don't miss any more NeuroCloud content. Have a wonderful day, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay chaotic. Love you guys. Bye-bye now.